In 1984, Soviet police held a serial killer in custody for questioning and let him go. A single mistake, a misclassified blood test, 6 more years, dozens more victims. This isn't a story about a killer. It's about the system that let him continue and the detective who fought that system for 12 years. Stay with me. The first thing Viktor Burakov remembered about the Rostov case wasn't the bodies. It was the waiting, the quiet desperation of parents who walked the streets at dusk, calling names that went unanswered. Mothers stopping strangers, asking if they'd seen a child wearing a red jacket. Fathers standing outside bus depots long after closing, hoping their son might step off the last route of the night. In the early years, these disappearances were brushed aside. A few teenagers at first, some labeled runaways, others dismissed outright. Police wrote the same line dozens of times, probably left home voluntarily. Across Rostov Oblast, those pleas for help went straight into filing cabinets and nowhere else. And in that silence, a systems failure was already taking shape. Rostov Oblast and neighboring regions, 12 years, 1978 to 1990. Let me put that in perspective. 52 people vanished and were murdered across these 12 years. Each mark is someone's child, someone's sibling, someone who should have grown up. Each gap between those marks, days, weeks, months when no one connected the pattern, when no one shared information across regions, when families reported missing loved ones and were told to wait. The system didn't listen, and the consequences were irreversible. Burakov arrived in 1982, already known as a disciplined investigator with little patience for bureaucracy. From the first week, he noticed something in the reports that others didn't. Repetition. Same age ranges, same disappearance zones, same pathways, forest edges, rail lines, bus stations. But without modern profiling, without DNA, without computers, all he had were patterns he could see only by manually organizing reports into piles on his desk. He wasn't dealing with runaways. He wasn't dealing with coincidences. He was dealing with an emerging, unacknowledged crisis. The human cost wasn't theoretical. The composite family, representative of dozens of real ones, grounded his resolve. A mother clutching a faded school bag as if holding it tighter could reverse time. A father who slept in a chair at the local police station because going home felt like giving up. Siblings who grew up in silence, their childhoods frozen at the moment their brother or sister vanished. These weren't cases. These were children with routines, tutors, friends, futures stolen before anyone in power acknowledged what was happening. But serial murder did not fit the Soviet narrative. It contradicted the image of a stable socialist society. Admitting it would imply internal decay. So the system denied it until denial was no longer possible. The Kravchenko tragedy. By 1983, political pressure demanded a solution. And that pressure produced a tragedy. Alexander Kravchenko, an innocent man, was accused of the 1978 murder of Yelena Zakhatnova. Despite evidence that didn't fully align, despite pleas from those who doubted the case, he was convicted and executed in July 1983. He died for a crime he did not commit. And here's the question we have to sit with. How many others were wrongly pursued? How many investigative hours were wasted on false leads while the real perpetrator remained free? Keep that question in mind. We'll return to it. The tragedy didn't end there. The real perpetrator continued. Burakov pressed forward, charting the geography of disappearances across maps pinned to his wall. Different towns, different years, but unmistakable clusters. He traced bus routes, railway lines, wooded paths, connecting dots the system refused to admit existed. Each step forward was slowed by bureaucracy. Requests for more personnel were denied. Requests for interregional coordination stalled. Requests for forensic resources were ignored. He wasn't fighting a killer. He was fighting the system meant to catch one. For 2 years, the pattern grew. More disappearances, more families waiting. Then, a moment that should have ended everything. The forensic error. In 1984, a critical near miss occurred. Chikatilo, briefly questioned, was released due to a misclassified blood type. Let me show you exactly what happened here. Blood type records. Type A versus corrected type AB. A large red X slams over the mismatch. Text. 1 mistake equals 6 more years. This single forensic error is everything wrong with how this system functioned. Burakov knew something was wrong with this suspect, but the blood type from bodily fluids at crime scenes didn't match the suspect's blood. What no one understood, because Soviet forensic science wasn't equipped for it, was that Chikatilo was a non-secretor. His bodily fluids did not reflect his actual blood type, a quirk of biology, a gap in forensic knowledge, and a deadly misunderstanding. So they let him go, and for 6 more years, the pattern continued. Dozens more families began the same cycle of waiting. Through the late 1980s, the case repeatedly went cold. Investigators burned out. Morale collapsed. Families grew desperate. Glasnost, the era of openness, finally allowed the press to report on disappearances. But recognition came too late for those already gone. Meanwhile, outwardly, the perpetrator lived an ordinary life: a supply clerk, a husband, a father. No brilliant criminal mastermind, no secretive genius, just an ordinary man who moved unnoticed because the system was not designed to see him. You might be wondering, why didn't anyone connect these cases sooner? Why didn't the Soviet system have a centralized database? The answer reveals everything about how ideology shaped and constrained law enforcement. Let me explain. Centralization existed, but only for preserving the state's image, not for solving crimes. Local police kept their own ledgers, regional offices kept theirs, and none of them communicated without permission. A disappearance in one district stayed in that district's records. A similar disappearance in the next town over was treated as a separate incident. It wasn't incompetence, it was structure, designed to avoid acknowledging problems that didn't fit the ideological narrative. This wasn't one failure, it was dozens of small failures woven into the system itself. By 1990, patterns finally converged. Police tightened surveillance around transport hubs, rail stations, bus depots, forest paths where previous victims had been found. Investigators noticed a man behaving strangely near a wooded area, approaching a child, pulling them aside toward the trees. This time, protocol was followed. This time, officers acted. On November 20th, 1990, Andrei Chikatilo was detained, not through heroics, not through coincidence, but through persistence and a system finally beginning to function as it should have a decade earlier. The interrogation and psychiatric evaluation began shortly after. From August to October 1991, the Serbsky Institute examined him. Their conclusion? He exhibited borderline personality disorder with sadistic features, but he was fully competent to stand trial.
Investigators cross-referenced his confessions with physical evidence. Confessions were verified, not simply accepted. Court standards were followed. He confessed to over 56 murders. He was tried for 53, convicted of 52. And even then, investigators carefully separated what could be proven from what could not. Because after years of systemic failure, accuracy mattered. The execution in 1994 is often framed as justice, but I want you to consider, was it? Stay with me for the next 2 minutes because this is where the story actually matters. The trial began April 14, 1992. Families who had waited years finally spoke. On October 15, 1992, the verdict was delivered. The sentence was death by shooting. It was carried out on February 14, 1994. But no execution could undo the wrongful death of Alexander Kravchenko, the 12 years of preventable suffering, or the 52 lives lost because a system failed to listen. Justice came, but late and incomplete. If you've made it this far, you're part of a smaller group of viewers who want to understand systems, not just stories. Most people click away when true crime doesn't give them graphic details or sensational psychology. But you're still here because you know the real lesson is in the systems we build or fail to build. Before we close, I want you to do 2 things. So let's return to the families, not as footnotes, but as the center of this story. Yelena Zakotnova, Lyubov Biryuk, Lyuba Volobuyeva. Verified names, real people, children who should have grown up. Their lives mattered more than any criminal narrative ever could. Here's the question that should haunt us. How many could have been saved? How many of these 52 deaths were preventable? Not just by catching one man sooner, but by building systems that protect the vulnerable. Systems that listen when families report missing children. Systems that share information across regions. Systems that prioritize truth over ideology. Viktor Burakov fought for 12 years against bureaucratic indifference. The families of Yelena Zakotnova, Lyuba Biryuk, Lyuba Volobuyeva, and 49 others waited for justice that came too late. Alexander Kravchenko died for a crime he didn't commit. Their stories matter, not because they are shocking, but because they show what happens when institutions ignore the vulnerable. If this documentary helped you understand how institutional failure enables tragedy, I have 2 asks. Share this with someone studying criminology, public policy, Soviet history, or anyone who needs to see that true crime is not about evil individuals, but broken systems. The families of Yelena Zakotnova, Lyuba Biryuk, Lyuba Volobuyeva, and 49 others waited for justice that came too late. Alexander Kravchenko died for a crime he didn't commit. Their stories matter, not because they are shocking, but because they show what happens when institutions ignore the vulnerable. If this documentary helped you understand how institutional failure enables tragedy, I have 2 asks. Share this with someone studying criminology, public policy, Soviet history, or anyone who needs to see that true crime is not about evil individuals, but broken systems. And leave a comment answering this. What modern institutions still fail vulnerable populations in ways similar to Soviet-era law enforcement? Where do you see these patterns today? I'll be reading every response. This production draws exclusively from court records, investigator testimony, and contemporaneous press reporting. All victim names come from verified public sources. Where accounts differ, we marked the uncertainty. Between 1978 and 1990, at least 52 people, many of them children, were murdered in and around Rostov Oblast. Their deaths were preventable. This is not a story about evil.
This is a story about systemic failure and human cost, about the systems we build to protect each other, and what happens when those systems fail the most vulnerable among us. Thank you for watching, and thank you for caring about more than just the sensational parts of these stories.